Welcome to PTTV, and I'm here today with Ellie Francis from Nepturnal. So I'm very excited to be talking to her, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Welcome. Ellie, would you like to give us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Yes, so my name is Ellie Francis. I'm from Nepturnal. I founded the company around a year ago. And so my background really, I started working in corporate about 4 to 5 years ago, actually just after I finished school. I worked in Big Four accounting, which is just the top 4 accounting firms that we have. And I worked in that for about a year between Belfast and London, and then decided to go to uni and read law with marketing. Following that, I went back into corporate. I worked in investment banking, which was really good fun. I really enjoyed banking, and then I just decided to set up my business as a real passion project just over a year ago.
So you've totally left banking?
I have completely left banking, yes, full-time in around April. So I completely have cut those ties, and I still keep in touch with all my lovely colleagues from the bank, but I just decided that I needed to be doing this full time, and it was getting busier, and I really wanted to give the time to my clients that they deserved.
That's amazing. So what was your sort of like deciding factor? Because that's a hard one, isn't it? What was your deciding factor to go, right, okay, I'm going to walk away from full-time, good employment to take the leap? Because I think that's the hardest bridge to get across when you're thinking about setting up your own business, isn't it?
Yes, it definitely is. It's one of those things that at the time, you know, you've put so much time and effort into this one path, but you get to a stage where you think, no, I need to give full time to my own business. And I suppose it was because I could see the issues that my business deals with arising in the bank. I was also events and marketing director for the Junior Chamber at the time as well, and we work with a number of young people sort of between the age of 18 and 40, and I could see that the issues were on the rise, and so I suppose I just believed that the time for this is now, and I didn't want to continue doing something that ultimately I knew I wasn't going to do forever. And I suppose I've always been one of those people where if you know that this isn't right, why wait?
Yeah, well, and that's the best way to be sometimes, because, you know, I think when you're starting a business, no time's a good time. There's always some sort of excuse, you know, you're getting married or you know, to buy a house.
Getting married.
Yeah, see, you didn't need those excuses. No. So, and I did like the way you say you work with young people 18 to 40. I like that. Yeah. I like that age bracket. So tell us a little bit about your new business then and what you do.
So, as I say, I founded Nepturnal. We are a training and consultancy firm. We offer 2 sides. As I say, the training side, we offer 3 main tiers of training. So we offer onboarding new joiner training. This will be aimed at graduates or apprentices, and millennials and Generation Z. And that would just involve giving them the commercial skills to bridge them from where they are to where they need to be within your company from a commercial and client service perspective. We also look at emerging leaders training. So maybe they've been in the company for a few years. This will be particularly relevant for the millennial generation, where they're moving into a phase where they're going to be becoming leaders and taking on teams of their own. And something that they find really difficult is transitioning that role. So you'll find one of 2 things happens. Either they'll be fantastic people managers and they'll forget about their day-to-day role, and that'll kind of fall by the wayside, or they'll continue to be really analytical, really into the day-to-day, and the people will kind of just sort themselves. And so we look at the emerging leaders and how your own role transitions to be more of a company-wide responsibility, so to speak. And then finally we look at management and senior management training on how to engage millennials and Generation Z and how they can really communicate and onboard that generation. And then on the consultant side, we work with companies really to do 3 things. We work on employer brand, which is how you appear in the market. So it's very similar to the brand that everyone knows, your market brand, only it's how you attract candidates and talent as opposed to clients. And then we also look at engaging millennials. How do you get them so connected with your business that their objectives are going in the same direction as yours, and they're really putting their heart and soul into promoting your business and producing results for your business. And then finally, retention. It's becoming really difficult to retain talent. The average length of stay time for a millennial is around 18 months, and companies really can't afford for that to continue, because obviously I'm sure, as you know, it's expensive to onboard and to train and to get everybody on the same page. and then if they leave after a short period of time, I suppose you feel like that work has gone to waste.
Yeah, and it's such a really an interesting niche, because I think the world has almost gone full circle in terms of recruitment and staff and how people think and new staff coming in, and we are seeing it ourselves as a business, and obviously you've identified it as a big problem, where maybe years ago people were more upset, more money focused or hours focused or whatever, but that whole outlook's changing. Would you agree with that?
I suppose the market has changed, and as you say, it's come full circle, because years ago there were more people than there were jobs, and so if you got a job you were so proud to have it, and actually you didn't need to create that connection with the company because you were proud to work there and you automatically wanted to produce results for the company. And as I say, you were so glad just to have a job in the first place, and they were hard times, and it was very difficult to get a job even for highly qualified people, whereas now we're in a bit of a candidate driven market, and there are more jobs than there are people, particularly in sectors like technology, fintech, finance. They can't recruit enough talent. There are so many companies recruiting from the same talent pool, whereby maybe you want to grow and you want to recruit 30 people next year, but if your competitor wants to recruit 30 people, whoever you're trying to recruit has a choice, and ultimately they will go to whoever has the best employer brand. So as you say, it's completely full circle in that companies now need to impress talent, whereas back in the day, essentially, people were fighting over themselves to impress companies, and that's just not the way that it is anymore. And I suppose the other big change is that piece of what your main priority is. And I suppose years ago, it would have been to do your company proud, to represent your company well, and to really produce results. Now people have a much more inward looking view, where they want to promote themselves, they want to look how their own career is going, and so it's up to companies to really align that with the company direction and show them that you can grow and you can build your own brand within this company. And as I say, some companies do it really well, and some not so well, but it's become such a culture shift now that it's really important to get that right.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I totally agree with you about employer brand. Years ago it was about, again, your brand and how it's seen to potential clients and potential customers, but back to now it is actually staff as well. People need to see your business as somewhere where they can have a career, where they can grow, where they contribute, where they can actually have responsibility, where they can buy in and actually help the company grow, as opposed to just be a member of staff.
Yep, exactly. And I think the main thing there is your market brand is so important. It's the most important thing to onboard clients, obviously to drive revenue and targets. But if you just look at that employer brand in the same way that you look at your market brand, essentially you replace the clients with candidates. Your competitors are your talent competitors. And that's really interesting, because your talent competitors aren't necessarily your market competitors. Yeah. And it just depends what role you're hiring for. For example, if you are a retail store hiring an accountant, your talent competitors aren't necessarily other retail stores. They might be financial services firms. They might be really any business and industry. And it's really important that you know who your competitors are. And in terms of the price issue, it's obviously comparable to salary. Salary is not the most important thing, as we know. We've moved away from that. But it's important to know how you compare. With candidates now, they look for a much more, I suppose, in the cost versus value analysis, they have a much more value-based approach, where they want to know essentially what's in it for me, what am I getting out of this, and they really start to delve deep into what training do you offer, what benefits do you have, what's your day-to-day culture like. And I suppose you can mask all that for the purposes of interview, open nights, everything looks great. But with millennials and Gen Z, once they come in the company, if they see it's not the case, they will just leave. Yeah. And that's obviously massively expensive.
And as you say, there's plenty of other places to go. So leaving is not, it is an option.
Exactly,
which is great. And back to, you're obviously working with lots of different businesses. What sort of challenges are you finding that businesses are experiencing when they haven't had the sort of services or the training that you offer?
I suppose one of the key issues is the soft skills gap, in terms of Resilience is a big one. People are really burning out. Obviously, the mental health crisis, everyone is really under pressure, under stress, and sometimes they need some guidance on the coping mechanisms in terms of how to handle that. Also, with automation going forward, it's becoming such a big thing, automation and AI for businesses, that the human element of client service is becoming really, really important. With your clients, generally everyone can buy or create roughly the same technology, and we know patents run out fairly quickly, and that element of what you can deliver is fairly transferable, but with your people, that's where you can really create an upper hand. And if you're providing the right commercial training and you're onboarding the right people and you're getting access to that key talent, that will really drive client service and revenue for your business. And I suppose the other massive challenge is there isn't enough talent, particularly in the tech sector and fintech as well. There are fewer candidates than there are roles, and even locally here in Belfast, you have so many technology companies putting down roots here, and it's absolutely fantastic to see for the economy, but they're recruiting from the same pool of roughly 3 sets of university graduates, and it's really, really difficult to get enough and to get quality talent into the business.
Yeah, you're right. And in terms of training, say for example a company was bringing you in to do some training for the millennial Gen Z people and that commercialization, what sort of skills do you help develop, or what sort of I suppose what's the sort of training plan that you go through with them?
So for the base level onboarding, for the grads and apprentices, we look at resilience as a big one.
It's massive, and it's a key word. Even I'm finding, coming from an education background, it's so important at such a young age. And I think children are becoming less and less resilient just because of just how society's changed.
The bubble wrap generation.
Yeah, exactly. And everything's kind of given to them, and everything's at their information is at their fingertips.
Exactly.
With being able to search for anything on Google and all of that. Years ago, you had to go to the library, you had to go find out stuff. Even that sort of, just even how research and how schoolwork is approached is all very, very different to probably in my generation to what children. I mean, I see my own children, and resilience is so important because it's a big wide world out there. I
guess one of the things as well is now we get medals for taking part as opposed to medals for winning, and I guess that's good and bad. We want to encourage different talents. We don't want to be telling kids that if you can't win a running race then you're worthless, and we do want to really emphasize that you will be good at something that someone else isn't, but they might be good at something that you're not good at. But the way that has been instilled in children has created a real atmosphere of I can always win, or I will always get something out of this. And I suppose even from my own personal perspective, if anyone said anything to me at school, like a teacher or another pupil, my mom would have just called them and said, like, this is unacceptable. And I'm really grateful for that. And at the time, it was great. But I suppose, depending on how often that's been done for you, I know friends who their parents would have never told them that they were wrong. They were always right, and whoever had wronged them was always wrong. And I suppose that attitude has really created almost an entitlement where people think I'm right, or at least there's no wrong answer, there's no stupid questions. And while that's something I always say in my training, I always encourage people to ask me in the training environment whatever they want. In life, there are wrong answers, and it's difficult sometimes to instill that, and sometimes this generation doesn't take criticism particularly well. But as you say, resilience is really, really important, particularly for that retention piece. If you want to keep them and you're not building resilience from day one, whether it be through trainers or your own internal process, then they probably won't last. Time management is another really big one, because we're so contactable now. Emails come through, people call, and it's really important to get to grips with how you organise your time. Do you allow interruptions? Is there a period during the day that you completely block yourself off and you're just doing work and that's it? And we also look at communication and influence in terms of client delivery, but also in terms of how you communicate with people within the company. Client service is something we also put into the onboarding program, particularly with view to internal clients and the underlying client service piece. Everyone knows the customer service, client service piece, where it's all great and you're smiley and you meet the client and it's fantastic. It's a little bit harder to train in your internal clients. So if someone perhaps in your team asks you to do something, they're your internal client and you need to be doing that for them. And so that's really, we look at presentation skills as well for companies where it's relevant, but a big thing for Nepturnal, and I suppose why we're different, is we really look at it being bespoke to the company. So I like to work with SMEs and sometimes large organisations, and because they're in such a competitive market, both commercially and from a talent perspective, it's really important that what they offer is different. And I've been to so much training in my own career that I know is just being regurgitated to different organisations. And that's fine. I suppose those organisations know that when they purchase the training, that they're buying essentially the training as a product. But I like to work on my training as more of a fluid relationship with my client. And we look at, I design the training and then I'll ask them certain things like, is a language barrier relevant? So in terms of communication, if you only work with UK clients, there's no point in me talking about a language barrier for half an hour because there's not going to be one. So it's really important that I know with my clients what in particular are these people going to be doing on a day-to-day. Because with Millennials and Generation Z, that real CEO style training where it's everything's great and you're going to be running this bank or you're going to be running this marketing firm in a couple of years' time, that just sets you up for a fall. That sets you up for someone turning up back at their desk and being really demotivated because they feel disempowered that they've received all this shiny training essentially that has nothing to do with their day-to-day role.
Yeah, no, and you're right. And those skills are exactly, hitting the mark of what people need and I suppose maybe what they haven't had in the past coming into a career and, as you say, wanting to develop and grow within a business. And that gap between the generational gap, how do you close that when you've got staff that are millennial and Generation Z and then you've got maybe older staff? What's your sort of advice in terms of bridging that gap?
Something I would say here is that it's really important to have that external perspective. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be me, but just that you look into what options there are out there for you in terms of engagement. If you have that generational gap, and I have clients who for a period worked with 20 members of staff who have now essentially got older, maybe in their 50s and 60s, and they're now deciding to grow and they're bringing on 20 more staff in their 20s, and that's a huge generational gap with no one in the middle there. And what really needs to happen is I like to do round tables. So essentially an engagement survey is on the right lines. My big issue with an engagement survey is you have to set the questions, or someone has to set the questions. So it's almost you're predicting what information you're going to get, which to me, it's usually multiple choice. So if it's not a problem you already know you have, then you're not going to tap into it anyway. And if you already know you have it, what's the point in spending the money doing the survey? So for me, it's really important to sit down with a group of people. I don't really know them. They don't know me. So I can't feed back who said what or even largely what department they were from or so it can be worked out who said what. And for me, I sit down and sort of say, what are the issues? Don't put words in their mouth, just ask them. And you usually get honesty. You get quite a lot of candid answers. And of course, the senior management team then as well have their own issues. My favourite thing is when I go into a company and they say the culture here is great, but the people don't appreciate it. And I'm like,
there's something slightly not right there.
And to me, your culture is whatever the people think of it, because ultimately they are the beholder and it's in the eye of the beholder, because if they don't like your culture, then what's it worth? And so it's really important, if you do want to bridge that generational gap, that you open communications. But it's not enough to say, oh, there's an open door policy, chat to me whenever you want, tell me if there are any issues, because generally people don't. And whenever people do have that policy, I always ask, how many issues roughly do you hear in a week? And they never hear very many. And tends to be maybe one or two people who actually raise issues, and then they just become known as like the problem people who are creating problems, when in actual fact they're potentially only communicating problems that everyone's talking about. And I sort of always say to clients, what do you think people are saying at lunchtime? What do you think people are saying when you're not here? Because that's really, really important, because it's those things that they're not saying to you that you can't tap into that are causing a massive deficit in your culture. Because sometimes with the best intentions, you're perfectly happy to fix issues. You want to drive a really good culture, but if people aren't communicating the issues to you in the first place, then it's completely futile. And the other big thing with communication, particularly between the generations, is the issues might be far less expensive than you think. You might be going to restructure your whole office or move offices because you think everybody wants to be right beside a certain place in town. And actually, they might just want something completely really cheap, like walking meetings. So I heard the other day a team are now going outside for a walk whenever they have a meeting, and everyone's going to talk during the walk. And it was really creative, and I thought, that's free. And that company would never have known that. They would have put in place all these expensive solutions without actually asking everybody, what do you want?
Yeah, exactly. And as you say, it is back to asking people, what do you want?
Yeah.
It's all good thinking, I will do this, I'm going to do this, people would love that. That's not always the case. And we find that even in research for content, what we think people are searching for online isn't always the case until you actually do the research behind it. And you mentioned you do management training as well. So what does that involve?
So we look at the general types of management training, but with a real focus on the millennial and Generation Z demographics. So we look at managing millennials and engaging millennials. So typically companies don't have an issue with managing millennials. You can have a contract and a basic level of work and business needs and everything else. But when it comes to getting that real gold dust that is discretionary effort and people really going over and above, that's engagement. That's people really investing in your brand in and of themselves. So we look at engaging millennials. We look at performance management for millennials, because that structure has really changed. Annual performance reviews and annual bonuses are starting to become a little bit pointless, because the experience we would have had in the bank, and I've seen this with a few clients as well, is everyone is pedal to the metal up to for the 3 months previous to the performance season. You get your bonus, you get a promotion maybe, and you're really all good for a month or two after that, and then it kind of dies off until you get to the promotion cycle again. Whereas what I'm telling companies is, have a one-to-one every month. If you're going to do annual performance reviews, which I think you can't really do them much more than semi-annually in terms of promotions, because there's far too much admin associated with that. If you're going to do them annually or semi-annually, have a monthly chat and just remind the person, we're one month on, you're wanting to achieve this year. What have you done this month to get there, and what are you planning next month? Because that breaks it right down into achievable goals. If you sit at the start of the year, as we're all about to do at the end of December, and plan all your big dreams for next year, unless you know the smaller things that you're going to do to get there, it doesn't make sense to believe that you'll achieve them. And it's the same with staff. You really want to be managing their performance on an ongoing basis for you to raise any issues, but also so as they have an opportunity to raise any issues that they may have as well. We look at unconscious bias as part of the management training as well. And then just generally that communication piece of, how do you approach these issues? How do you talk to people? And we run it as a 3-day course, and some companies can dispense their managers for 3 days. Generally companies can't, and so we can run it over 3 days through different months, or 6 half days, whatever suits. And it just creates that real opportunity to take a step back from your day-to-day role and really learn and also think about your management style, because sometimes managers are horrified when they sit back and think about things they've said or people they've reprimanded or whatever it may be, and they think like, I just really wouldn't have said that if I wasn't in such a bad mood. And it's to allow them to build some resilience as well, and to get under control that every time you present yourself to your employees, that's your leadership style, and it doesn't really matter if you're in a bad mood or not. They're not taking that into account. They're actually making a judgment on your leadership and how they enjoy working for you in those moments. And as we know, and it's a massive cliche, people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses or leaders or whatever it may be. And so I think it's really, really important for managers to take that time out and really analyse what type of leader am I, and how is that working with the millennial and Generation Z demographic.
Yeah, and as you say, it's back to that open dialogue. It's so important.
So
it's
important.
not about, as you say, performance review, you sitting down saying, look, at these are the targets I think you should be working on. It is that open discussion of, what do you think? Let's talk about this together. How are we going to get there? And it's that joint effort. And as you say, in that approachability and people being able to actually express their views and build their career and grow their vision. Because again, people have different career paths that they aspire to. I mean, we had a member of staff here once who came in and was content but really was interested in photography, and that was something that was a real passion that they wanted to explore. And you know, as a business, if we can facilitate that at any opportunity, we try to do that, because it's, you know, it's about vision as well, and how people want to grow and skills that they want to develop out, and that may not necessarily be directly related to their job role.
And it's also about analysing what do they want as people or from life, as opposed to looking at it on the very micro scale of their relationship with the organisation. Because I always say to companies, and something I'm really obsessed with, is what motivates people. I love researching and looking into the psychology, particularly within this demographic, of motivating factors, because if you can tap into what someone's motivations are, you can really empower them to do anything, and really help them work within your organisation. And it's so vital to understand that everyone is motivated differently. And open dialogue is the only thing that will let you tap into that, because when you look at someone, they might be desperate to get promoted, they might want to be really senior within the organisation, and I've met people before who their big priority is they just want to move up and move up and move up, and that's great and that's really ambitious. You might also have people who are literally there to pay the bills, and they're like, I want to work in this job, I don't mind it, but I just want to pay my bills. And once you know that they're motivated perhaps by family life, perhaps they're motivated because they like to go on holiday once a year, once you know those different motivations, it really allows you to work with that person, and they get what they want and you get what you want. And that's just so important to actually understand what is motivating people, and also what is demotivating, what's causing people to feel like, oh, I really don't feel good about this, and they're going home at the end of the day and they're thinking negatively about your organisation. And you might be thinking quite negatively about them as well, depending on what's happened. But you have to think about the bigger picture and what is this going to result in the end.
Yeah, and as you say, it's back to that relationship, isn't it? It's that relationship, and having the opportunity to be open and be able to say what you think from a staff member point of view and a management point of view. And that's, to me, about sustainability and business growth, and that can only happen when those relationships are built and they firm foundations, and people feel comfortable to be able to speak their mind and be able to contribute, you know, into the business and build that. And in terms of your sorts of training, what are the benefits in order to help you stand out against your competition in terms of retention and grabbing those staff members from that very tight pool? And what would you say that the benefits of your training help support businesses be able to do that?
So for me, the two key benefits are, I am a millennial, so I'm 24, so I have really worked within corporate. I've had these experiences of client service delivery, but culturally I'm part of this generation. I understand what's motivating them. I have access to such a wide range of peers who all have jobs. I hear what they say, and largely it's the same 4 or 5 things coming out of every organisation. It's not necessarily you hear something different every day. There are key massive issues going on in the background, so I really look at those with my training, and I really look at my training as to what's going to engage this demographic from a psychology perspective. What do they want to see? What do they want to do? How do they like training to be delivered, and how will it stay with them? And I also look at, they can contact me afterwards, so I give my cards or my details, and I sort of say, once you get into the workplace, if something's not working out, send me an email and say, look, we were talking about resilience, you've given me these coping strategies, but honestly today I just really don't know what to do. I'm feeling this way. what's the best kind of thing for me to do, and I'll email you back. It might not be within an hour, but I'll get back to you. And I think that's a real key thing for organisations, is that the training doesn't end with the invoice ultimately, which is really important. And then the second thing is really that bespoke piece. So many training companies just sell training courses, and they might say that they're bespoke, but largely they might have a bespoke example in there somewhere. Largely they're the same thing. And for me, it's really important that once the training is designed, that I have that final call with the organisation to go through the plan and try to implant as much information with the person's role. So as in the background, we're really trying to create, it's not magic, but we're really trying to create that connection with the brand. And your career can grow within this organisation, and that just really, really motivates people, and they start to feel like, wow, I love it here. I really want to work here. I want to do my manager proud. This training's been great. And it's about fun. It's about creating that environment where people can have fun, really enjoy the training, but that it's really important that it relates to that role that they're doing. Because a big issue with soft skills training that a lot of training companies don't address is that it is generic. And by its very nature, it needs to be generic, it needs to be somewhat transferable. But if it's so generic that you could really deliver it to anyone, that's when there is a problem ultimately.
Yeah, and back to that bespoke, because every business is different. Every business has different challenges. They're made up differently. They might have different generational gaps. They might only have a few millennials. They might all be millennials.
Exactly.
And it's a completely different package for every different business. And actually, as you say, the training is actually designed to support them and their issues, their challenges, their vision. It's so much more meaningful and impactful than, as you say, something that's lifted off the shelf and say, look, these are the 10 things that millennials want. That's what you have to do.
Exactly.
I'm going to tell you what you have to, how you do them. And that's a different thing completely. There's probably a time and place for that. But if you want to, I suppose, as you say, deep delve and have that lasting effect, and it's not just a sort of tick in the box, done the training, it's actually going to be impactful, and it's going to help the business grow and take the business forward, then it needs to be a deep delve and a really good understanding of the business and its needs and the staff needs as well.
Yes, so I suppose that's a key thing for me, because there are many companies who want to offer training and tick the L&D box and that's it. And that's completely fine. If that's the way they want to do that, that's okay. Those aren't my clients, essentially. Those are clients of companies who just do off-the-shelf training, and as you say, there's a time and a place for that, and that's great. But for me, I really want to work with companies who have embedded development and embedded engagement within their culture, and they really want to reach out to this generation. And I suppose you're exactly right in what you're saying. There are organisations who, for example, tech companies are largely made up of millennials. A big chunk of their demographic will be millennials and now Generation Z going forward. There are equally companies who only have 4 millennials out of 100 staff. What I would say to those companies is it's important that you're reaching out to all demographics, and just because you have a wide range of demographics doesn't mean that you can reach out to them as a whole. That doesn't work. You are focusing on one of them, whether you realise it or not, and you really need to look at what can you do to focus on each individual generation. And if you have too many to do a real delve into each of them, or to bring in different consultants, that's completely fine. But it's really important that you're doing your research online into how you can work with each individual person, not even just down to the demographic, but the individual people within your organisation, because that builds a true brand relationship, and that person will stay with you if you understand them and they understand you, essentially.
Yeah, no, and you're right, and it's so important. Back to that individualised person and understanding back to the motivation and what motivates them and what they're interested in. It's just key, and it's key for that staff retention piece. And I mean, I find it, we found it ourselves, running a business. I found it when I was in the teaching. I mean, I was, abroad teaching, so many people from Northern Ireland, so many people from the UK teaching abroad, and all that talent's moving away just because they have a choice and they have the opportunities to be able to do that, and it's so key. So back to your perfect client. Who is your perfect client?
My perfect client, I like to work with organisations, financial services, fintech. I've worked with a couple of insurance companies as well as technology as well. I love getting into the tech and fintech companies. They're so creative, and because they're startups generally and they have a few less staff, they'll maybe have 100 to 200 employees, you can really get into the nitty gritty and make key meaningful changes. With massive organisations, it's very difficult to filter changes through everybody, because essentially if you're going to have a culture change, and I like to say to organisations, you can't just decide you're having a culture change on Monday. Essentially, it has to be embedded, and you have to make sure that everyone is on board, particularly from that management level up. So for me, I love to work with the financial services firms and the fintechs because I've been there. I've worked in banking, I've worked in corporate M&A, and I really, really know what those people are dealing with on a daily basis. I know what their KPIs are, I know the pressures they're under, and I know what their clients are asking from them. And so for me, it's really easy to relate to them and to work with them as well. And with the technology sector, as I say, there are a lot of millennials and a lot of Generation Z, and for me, I can really connect with them because I am that age and I've worked with a lot of them throughout the period of my career. Financial services has become a lot more embedded with technology, and it's just really, really interesting for me to work with those types of companies. I like to work with companies who have authority to make meaningful changes. It's difficult when you do engagement or consulting and the person who I'm working with, their hands are completely tied, and they know the changes need made, but essentially they don't have that sign-off authority in the end. So for me, it's really important that my clients, less so from a training perspective, because the L&D director and myself can work well together, and the training piece can be perfect. But with the consultant side of things and the more bespoke engagement and employer brand, it's really important that I have access to a decision maker who can make meaningful changes within the business.
Yeah, no, and you're right, because it's almost meaningless doing all the training, doing all the work, and then going, by the way, actually,
I can't.
We can't implement this.
Yeah, you find sometimes with international companies, they will have, and I'm sure you find this yourself probably with your own business, they will have structures, and ultimately people are getting it a bit handy and don't really want to change those structures because that's a lot of work. And you might be working with a really progressive person. So I might be working with someone in Dublin or London who's super progressive, really wants the organisation to change. But in terms of things like binning the annual bonus, getting rid of the annual bonus and deciding now we're going to do smaller bonuses more often, that's not a decision that can be taken at a middle management level. That needs to be taken from the top and organisation wide. And so for me, it's really important to work with someone in that position to make those key decisions. And you don't necessarily obviously have to take my advice on board whenever I'm working with you. If I'm saying, oh, I think this would be great, and you're thinking there's no chance we're doing that, that's completely fine. But it's really important that you're in the position to make that decision.
Yeah, and that you're open to the training, because otherwise there's kind of no point if you're just going to still go down the same route that you always did before you got the training. So the whole point is to engage with the training, and as you say, some things that you may suggest might not work for that organisation, or they might think we'll do a version of that, and that's natural. But as you say, it needs to be that openness and welcoming you in and taking everything you say on board to be able to, again, take it forward.
And it's really important for me that my clients see the importance of this, that they understand going forward. This used to be an optional thing that really cool companies did. They engaged millennials and it was great and everyone loved it, and ball pits and reception and slides and all of this type of stuff. Now it's actually essential, because by 2020, 50% of the global workforce will be millennial. That obviously expands when we look at Generation Z. It doesn't decrease. And by 2025, it's up to 75% will be millennials and Generation Z. So while you might have a small number of this demographic at the minute, if you're planning for growth going forward, they will be becoming bigger and bigger and bigger within your organisation. And it has been a massive culture shift compared with previous generations. Every generation is different, but between Gen X and Millennials has been a massive culture shift. There will be a culture shift with Generation Z, but a slightly less seismic one, whereas with the Millennials it's been massive, and it's really important that companies are open to working with that, because for me, I sometimes work with companies who their attitude is, rightly or wrongly, oh, millennials don't want to work, they want to do everything on their terms. My favourite phrase, back in my day, there was none of this deciding what you want, or the company decided and you just went along with it because you were glad to have a job. That's just not the thing anymore. And my big piece of advice to companies would be, whether you agree or disagree with the culture change, it is a change, and it's something that you either get on board with or you get left behind ultimately.
Yeah, you're right. And you know, I mean, I obviously am between those generation gaps. And when I think of when I left university, I mean, there was one school computer on the internet when I left secondary school. So if you can think about it that, and I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old. Well, kind of. But you know, if you think about that, when I was in my A-levels, we had one computer on the internet in the school. I learned to send my first email when I went to university. So if you think how that's changed in 20 years, it's been massive compared to 40 years or 50 years previously. The technology was so slow to change. But that gap, I mean, I'm seeing between me now and my own children. I'm like, oh my good gracious me, it is amazing. You know, and I see my children teaching their grandparents how to use iPads, and I'm talking my 2-year-old teaching her grandparents how to use iPads, because it's second nature to them.
And learning
as you
to spell and stuff.
Exactly. And as you say, it is a completely different generation, and it's growing. Employers have to embrace this and learn how to engage and understand the generation, because as you say, you can say all you want that it wasn't the same in my day and you didn't do this and you didn't do that. You can't change it. That's how the generation has changed. So you need to either, as you say, engage, jump on board and learn how to engage with them, or be left behind and, you know, end up with no staff because you're not a company that people want to come and work for.
And it's easier sometimes than people think. As we know and as we've discussed even today, they are a vocal generation. If you ask them for their opinion, generally they will tell you in the right environment. They won't sit and be scared to say, or at least you'll know when 2 or 3 of them leave within close succession. And I suppose, especially in financial services, there's very much the attitude that when people resign, it's because they can't hack the pace, or because they're weaker, or because this isn't for them. But no one ever looks inward at what is this organisation doing to thwart that? What's this organisation doing to make this situation better? Because there is that real attitude of, well, if they don't like it, they can lump it. But ultimately they are lumping it, and you're going to be left with no talent, essentially, or very low caliber talent, which, and I don't like to refer to low caliber talent because I do believe that everyone is good at something, but when you need people to be good at one thing in particular, you want to have your choice of those candidates, and there's only one way to achieve that.
Yeah, and as you say, it's back to a business looking inwardly and saying, what could we have done to prevent that?
Yeah.
And that's the key point.
Yeah.
As opposed to, and sometimes there isn't. Sometimes somebody wants to move country or move house or go somewhere else or have children or do something else, and that's fine. But there is that sort of inward piece of, hold on a minute, could we have prevented that? What could we have done better? What could we have done to meet that person's needs better?
Well, it was like my old boss used to always ask me, I think you knew this is a bit of a passion project for me on an ongoing basis, but he used to ask me whenever people left, like, what are we doing wrong? Like, what's the problem? And he, to be fair, was really wanting to change, and he was really passionate about driving a culture change in the team, and he was freaking out about everyone that left. And as I said to him at the time, if someone leaves an investment bank to become a dolphin trainer, there's not much you can do about it, because you can't get them training dolphins downstairs. You let them go and that's it. If someone leaves an investment bank to work at another investment bank, or to work at a financial services company or a fintech, which is a massive shift that financial services companies need to be careful with at the minute, that's when you have a problem, because they are not leaving because they don't want to do the work. They're going to do the work, but they're going to do it somewhere else. And you can sit around and say it's because the company offered them a load more money, but it's not, because it's never that much. You might move companies and get a couple of £1,000 pay rise, maybe more than that. Monthly, that doesn't equate to that much in terms of a banking salary. And so people aren't leaving because of that, and if you're saying that that's why it is, you're really not digging deep enough into what's going on. Because I think what we tend to forget as well is that it's easy to say millennials don't stay anywhere, they move around, they don't want to stick at anything. it's a massive hassle to move jobs. Like it really, really is. You have to get sometimes a new location, a new commuting system. You have to generally get it's always a new team, a new way of working. It's really big kind of uproot in your day-to-day life, and it's something that people will only undertake if they're getting something substantial out of it, and that hasn't changed with this generation. And I suppose companies need to be really careful as well because of the gig economy. So generally people are leaving what they're doing to freelance, and you can do almost anything freelance now, and as we know from a corporate governance perspective, the UK is one of the easiest companies to set up a business from a legal perspective in. And so people can do it for themselves. And it might be a slightly riskier option, but in the current economy, it's not that much riskier. And so you really need to be offering something to make people stay.
Yeah. It's honestly, you've opened my eyes this morning. It's been really, really interesting. So what is the future for Nepturnal?
So hopefully for Nepturnal, the future is bright. As I say, this generation is not going anywhere, and they are expanding and expanding within the workplace. And it's something that I'm really excited to see the shifts and the innovation that they can bring to the workplace. In terms of the near future, next year I'm super busy with my training and my consultant, which is really good. I would love to squeeze in a few more speaking engagements. I really like to talk to a bigger audience because for me it's an opportunity to get this message out to a wider number of people and to really help businesses who can't afford to bring in consultants. They don't want to bring in consultants. They don't want to hire external trainers, and they're at that kind of seed stage where they really need to do it themselves. And we all know some businesses are at that stage where literally everything you have to do yourself. And I love speaking engagements for that opportunity to really help those companies do this themselves and to give them the knowledge that they can go back into the company and actually implement some of these things. And for me, particularly from a local perspective, it's so exciting for the future of Nepturnal to see so many fintech and technology companies putting down their roots in Belfast, because I'm really excited to work with as many of them as I can and really to transform their talent strategy, because we have such a great talent opportunity in Belfast, and I would love to see more students choosing to stay here after their careers and work with these companies once they manage to get their culture on par with the likes of London and Dublin and even further afield like New York as well.
So small aspirations then. It's all good. It must be part of the millennial generation.
We don't really think inside the box. The box is gone.
Yeah, the box has disappeared. It's now a big globe. No, it's been so interesting. And Ellie, if someone wanted to avail of your services or contact you, what's the best way to do that?
The best place to get me is actually on LinkedIn at Ellie Francis, or you are very welcome to contact me via email, and that would just be ellie@nepturnal.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
It's been really interesting. I'm sure lots of people are going to really enjoy this. Now they'll all be scrabbling thinking, oh my goodness, I haven't got a talent strategy, I better get one. So thank you so much for your time, and that's all from us today at PTTV. I really hope you enjoyed watching, and you've got lots of work to do now after listening to Ellie, and we will see you all soon.